Hello everyone again, and welcome back to today's video where I'm going to be discussing One Piece chapter 969. Now I know it's a bit late, but I want to discuss this chapter before the Viz translation of the new chapter comes out, because damn Oda, he's done it again. I mean, God, Orochi's a piece of crap, isn't he? Let's just talk about it. So we start off with the cover page where Goatee has his ass kicked by the Navy trying to rescue Chiffon. Now I'm not really interested in that, but I'm kind of a bit disappointed because he's part of a Supernova's crew, right? So you'd expect him to at least be able to rescue the captain's missus. So let's just get on to the chapter because I'm not really too bothered about it. So we start off with the chapter with Oden trying to cut down Orochi with his dual blades, but is blocked by a person named Senimaru Kuroizumi, who is a user of the Bari Bari no Mi. Now we know eventually this person's going to die because Bartolomeo is currently using that fruit. But here's where I have a little bit of a problem with this chapter. From the panels, it doesn't look like Oden is using Haki, and I feel like he should be easily be able to cut through the barrier, and it just doesn't sit right with me. Then of course you have Orochi as soon as he realises Oden can't get to him, being all confident. Now this is the beginning part of why I really start to hate Orochi, because I always don't like people that are in power that are weak. You know, you have Wapol, but this Orochi guy just takes it to a whole new level. And I feel there's a big reason why at the moment he seems like paranoid about the Red Scabbards coming back, and that is because there's no longer the user of the Bari Bari no Mi to protect him, and he no longer feels invincible. In the next page we see two arrows being shot out of nowhere, being shot into the crowd, causing a couple of people to go blind, and then the crowd just runs away, and of course Kaido then starts to fly in the sky above the capital. The next thing we see is Oden dancing like a fool in the streets, causing the citizens of Wano to fall in despair. And this is part of the chapter I really didn't like, in a good way, because I really want to know why Oden is listening to this fool, Orochi. I mean, the only thing I can think of as the reason why he's doing this is because of the citizens of Wano, and he must have come up with some kind of deal to where he leaves Kuri alone, because it doesn't seem like Orochi's going to touch Kuri until later on in the chapter where he finally appears 5 years later. But there must have also been some kind of other thing for him to cause to do this, such as Orochi maybe promising to open the Wano borders. We're assuming that this is the Wano borders having to be open is something to do with the One Piece, right? Because why after all this travelling would he suddenly feel that he needs these borders to open? So the only way I can see him abandoning that and not longer becoming the Shogun and listening to what Orochi says is if he promised to open up the borders, leave Kuri and his family in the daimyo, Kuri and his Red Scabbards alone. We also get to see a young Shinobu eavesdropping on the conversation between Orochi and Oden. So I feel later on down the line she's going to tell the truth about the conversation that was had, or we may get it in a later chapter, either way. So after a year of Oden dancing around like a fool once a week in the streets of the capital city, Orochi hands him a newspaper article explaining about Roger's death. Now I feel like Orochi did this to try and break Odin, but clearly it didn't work. So it was just such a great reaction from Odin, and up until that point I thought the old hag was impersonating him dancing, but because of the reaction Odin displayed, it's quite clear that it isn't. And we also see later on in the chapter her and the old man with the barrier no Mi ability showing up to Kuri 5 years later with him. So we know Odin's Odin. Now, if we're going by what the editors are saying, that there's only going to be roughly 5 years of One Piece left, I feel like if that wasn't the case, the panel where Moria faces up against a Kaido would have been longer. For it to only be one panel was a kind of a bit disappointing. I've got to admit, Moria looked kind of a badass in this chapter for that one panel. We obviously know he loses ultimately in the end, right? But it still would have been nice to see a bit more. And of course, this is also where Shisui is stolen as well. Unlike the previous panel, a panel I really did enjoy in this chapter is such a simple one, but it just goes to show volumes of how loyal Toki is to Odin, where of course we see Odin asking if she would like a divorce, and she flat out refuses and says, "Do you want me to get angry?" I just really love that panel, and it just makes me feel even more sad about her eventual death. Finally, we fast forward 5 years later, and Orochi is turning up at Kuri. Now, what has changed for him to turn up to Kuri? Because he hasn't touched it this whole entire time, but suddenly he feels confident enough to come into the place and demand to Odin that he would like to start up a weapon factory here. So does that mean that he finally feels powerful enough with the backing of Kaido and the weapons he's procured and surely throughout the 5 years he's formed some relationships with other people, to keep on gathering momentum and power because of Odin acting like a fool. I'm sure people no longer believe in him, and then that way they've kind of turned sides to be on Orochi's side because they see the downfall and the fall of Odin, their idiot lord. We then get the revelation that Hyogoro has become a bit too much for Orochi's a handle, so he set Kaido on him, and whilst they were taking him prisoner, they attempted, his wife and his men attempted to rescue him, and 16 of his men, Hyogoro's men, and his wife ended up dying. Now this serves as the final straw Odin can now take, and finally we see him break down and declare that he now wants to cut down Kaido, which of course delights the rest of his scabbards, and they prepare to head into a fierce battle. That last page, was just epic to see that all of the 9 red scabbards as one, along with Odin, preparing for that fight. We know that he ultimately loses, right? But he's now got a fire in his eye, and I can't wait for next week's chapter. And of course, we finally now know why that his retainers became to be known as the 9 red scabbards. So overall, I thought it was a good chapter. Not a great chapter, but a good chapter nonetheless. It was just one of those chapters where you're in such confusion. You don't know what Odin's doing, what he's doing. You really, 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 really hate Orochi. You think he's such a scumbag now, and I can't wait for when we get to present day and we finally see him be cut down. And I just can't wait for the next chapter, and I'll be looking forward to reading it on Sunday by the Viz official translation, and hopefully I'll have a video up for you guys on Monday discussing that chapter as well. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like if you liked the video, and a comment as to why you feel Oden is doing what he's doing, and we'll see you on Monday.